Resolute Forest Products has shut down the newsprint mill in Iroquois Falls, Ontario, a move that will result in the loss of 182 jobs in a town of just 4,600 people. Joining us now for more on how his town is dealing with the closure in Iroquois Falls, Ontario via Skype, here's Mayor Michael Shea. Your Worship, it's good to have you on the program tonight. How are you doing?
Nice to have you. Nice to be with all of you.
I'm going to read this excerpt from the Globe and Mail just to set up the background for this, because I suspect a lot of people south of the French River don't know about it, so get comfortable and then we'll come back with a question. Here we go. When the forest products industry was at its height, such domestic giants as Abitibi Price Inc., Macmillan Bloedel Limited, and Noranda Forest Inc. employed more than 300,000 Canadians, making newsprint, tissues, fine paper, cardboard, floor joists, and wall studs. They were global powerhouses that shipped those products around the world. That era has ended like the thud of a 25-meter-tall black spruce tree crashing to the ground, as laid-off workers from Campbell River, BC, to Grand Falls, Windsor, Newfoundland, and scores of communities in between can testify. The numbers are startling. As recently as September 2004, more than 300,000 Canadians earned a living from logging, paper making, and wood products manufacturing. A decade later, the industry employed just under 200,000 people. That loss of 118,000 jobs is more than one-third of the industry's workforce, and for the most part, high-paying jobs with good benefits and pensions. It's the equivalent of eliminating every job in the auto assembly and auto parts sector in Canada. Okay, that's what's at stake, Mayor Shea. I'd like to know, first off, how you got the news that Resolute was going to close its doors.
We had an announcement on 3 days after myself being elected, asked to be called to their office here in Iroquois Falls, and we were told that perhaps I should show up. It might be something that may affect our community. And indeed, when I arrived there, all the employees there, even they themselves, had no idea what was actually going to happen. But they actually and finally did say this mill is and shall be closed December 22, 3 days prior to Christmas.
So when you got the news, this was hardly inevitable. You didn't think this was what was going to be announced.
Absolute thunder. It was a bitter, bitter day. All the citizens of Iroquois Falls had their heads down, not even understanding or believing what's going to happen to this town. You're absolutely right.
I want people to have a sense of the importance, the singular importance this mill had in this town. So give us some of the history. How far back does it go?
Well, it's true. Abitibi this is the Abitibi's empire. This was the very first mill that Abitibi built. It opened the north immensely. The people from down south, all citizens from Quebec, southern Ontario, this was their new life. They all took the train, came up here and set up shop and made this their home for, well, this is going on for the last 102 years.
And it was the largest employer in town?
Absolutely, for sure.
So now everybody's being laid off. What's the average age, would you say, of the workers who are losing their jobs?
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. The average age is about 52 years old, and left or right of that.
And what is their kind of state of mind right now? I'm sure you're in touch with all of them. What's their state of mind as to their prospects for trying to find something else?
Well, this was action reaction. So at the very beginning, for the last 2 weeks, has been like an anger event happening in Iroquois Falls, but things seem to be following or seeming down a bit. We had a huge job fair here last week. They were coming in from Newfoundland, they were coming in from Nova Scotia, they're coming in from Saskatchewan. They were all looking for people to employ in their own mills. We couldn't believe that so many people had come from so far away to search for the potential employees here that lost their jobs. That, we're wishing that they would probably relocate to communities beyond here. So that having been said, most employees from the Resolute Mill feel very strong and wanting to remain here. So they're not probably willing to relocate that far.
Well, that's the next thing I was going to get to. What percentage of people do you think are A, old enough to retire and therefore will, B, want to go somewhere else and we'll take them up on their offer, or C, sticking around and crossing fingers?
I'm probably very confident to say that most will find work around the area.
In what?
Well, Iroquois Falls, just to make clear, is not an isolated community. Yes, we are on Highway 11. We're not on Highway 17, so we are a little more north. There are a lot of mines here, whether like 30 minutes from Timmins or another 30 minutes from Black River Matheson. A lot have found employment in the gold mines around here, and that's a very small commute back and forth here. So most will choose to remain here, make their homes here, and probably retire eventually.
So can you give us a sense about what percentage of that 182 you think will be able to find a new job?
I trust if you have a hunger to want to go back to work, more like I believe, I don't have the exact numbers, but of the 180 laid off here, at least 60 will have to provide and look for extra work between now and the next 5 years. So I'm confident all will find work in the area. That's my feeling.
That's your feeling. Is it based in fact or is it based in wishful thinking?
That's good. I'll go half and half on that one.
Okay, half and half. That's reasonable. Okay, half and half. Obviously, when something like this happens in a small town, which relies overwhelmingly on one employer, it has ripple effects. Can you give us some idea about what those are?
You couldn't be more right about that. It's true. You know, whether you're a trucker, whether you're an industrial company providing services to the mill, whether you're a grocery store, whether you're a gas attendant, like this mill consumed a lot of product around here in the region. You know, loggers, and it really does. It goes everywhere around here.
Do the workers understand that you know, this is the way it's been going? This isn't this didn't just happen. This has been many years in the making. Do they get that, or are they furious with the company? Which is it?
I can perhaps say that we sort of felt that perhaps another year or two or three that the newsprint industry would have probably ceased somewhere around here, because it has been hinted years after year, and we've actually really thought deep in our hearts that perhaps 3 more years would give us, you know, certainty that perhaps the newsprint mill would eventually close. But it happened so abruptly and so unannounced. And yes, we have to say that this mill has made, unbelievable to say that this mill has made newsprint exclusively for 100 years. Like it's unfathomable to believe that that's something that we've experienced in this community.
Any special irritation about the fact that they made the announcement 3 days before Christmas?
Absolutely. That was so abrupt. Like we thought Resolute would have some sort of corporate social responsibility, and you know, I'm hoping they have and they do, but somehow we don't feel that right now. Sometimes
these old facilities or pieces of infrastructure can be repurposed for other means. Other industries come in, that kind of thing. Any possibility of that happening here?
You're 100% correct, and that's exactly where Mayor and Council stands here, and this community stands as well. This mill has buildings that could be repurposed and refurbished for other new wood manufacturing or industry. There might be a tree in the forest, but a tree in the forest could be turned into a whole new package. It does not have to be newsprint or 2x4s.
All right, so the town has taken a serious blow. Give us just finally your sense about how well you think people are able to deal with this and how optimistic they can be about their futures.
Well, if we all stay together and we stick together, we trust new developers will come into this community and set up shop here. We understand newsprint is gone. They made that clear. And Resolute has made it clear that there will be no newsprint manufactured, not with their machines anyhow. But nonetheless, we feel confident between now and a year or 2 or 3, and perhaps less than that, new industry will set up shop in Iroquois Falls. It's a beautiful place to make your home. It's a great place to raise a family, and really, like, we're right on the map. There's a whole future for Iroquois Falls, and we're looking forward to that one.
Mayor Shea, we wish you well, and we thank you for coming on TVO tonight to tell us all about it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
That's Mayor Michael Shea from Iroquois Falls, Ontario. Now, we're going to broaden the discussion and look at how other single resource towns across the province fare under these new realities. Joining us now for that discussion in Thunder Bay, Ontario via Skype, Madge Richardson, Executive Director of the North Superior Workforce Planning Board. And with us here in studio, Jameson Stevie, Executive Director at the Martin Prosperity Institute and the Institute for Competitiveness and Prosperity, and Stan Sudol, Toronto-based communications consultant, mining columnist, and editor at republicofmining.com. And I'm happy to welcome Jameson for the first time you to this program. Stan, good to see you again. You've been here many times before. And Madge, we met you up in Thunder Bay when we were there this past weekend. It's good to, even if only virtually, see you again, and thanks for coming on TVO tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's get into this, friends. How common, Madge, to you first, how common are stories like the one we've just heard from Iroquois Falls around our province these days?
Unfortunately, they have been more common than one would hope. And although we have seen, at one point, I can safely say along Highway 17, almost every community was in transition or an adjustment program with the government because of downsizing or closures. And thankfully, there aren't as many now, but still there's still the ripple effects and still people that are struggling to find that employment that fit and was as comfortable as what they were used to.
Madge, let me follow up with this, because we heard that from the mayor that some people are looking for jobs in the mines that are nearby. And I just wonder, based on your experience, how transferable are the skills that one would have in a paper mill compared to what you need to know to go digging for gold or something else in the mines?
Well, thankfully, I think a lot of skills are transferable. Again, you have to look at what the skill sets are specifically, and there may be some variation, certainly, of what the tasks that you would need to perform. But the basic background and knowledge that you would bring to that new job, you would be able to transfer those fairly quickly. It would just be assimilating some of the new knowledge from the environment that you were in, but those other sets of skills would certainly see you through and provide a very strong foundation for the learning curve that's ahead in any new job.
Jameson, when this happens, and Madge is telling us it happens with increasing frequency these days, what's in place from federal, provincial, local governments to try to ease the transition for those who find themselves out of work without a lot of options?
Well, without getting into arcane acronyms and government programs, I think the key word you use is transition. And I would say when government responds, there's two areas in which they're trying to respond by way of transition. One is education, retraining, repurposing the human capital that exists there, so the people. That's number one. And then number two, I think you have two types of losses in these types of communities. And it's not just happening in Northern Ontario, but I think it's particularly acute there and felt in a greater degree. A company that leaves because of global economic forces, a commodity price has gone down. This is an Alberta problem as well as an Ontario problem. Mm-hmm. That's number one. The other one would be where a company just makes a decision to up and leave. For government, I'd say the latter one is an easier one to handle because there's at least perhaps some pressure that you can put on the company to stay or reconsider the decision, or there's other alternatives. The market hasn't collapsed. You're trying to find a transition for other companies to move in. It sounds like that's where the mayor of Iroquois Falls is, where his mind is at, repurposing some pretty impressive machinery and talent that they have in their community.
I'm going from memory here, which often fails me, so you'll help me out here. I asked this question because you used to be Principal Secretary to Premier Dalton McGuinty.
My memory is fading as well, but yes.
You haven't forgotten that yet?
No, I haven't, no. Almost 3 years though, so.
Somewhere in the midst of his time as Premier, the Liberal government brought in, and I'm forgetting the name of it now, is it Second Career?
Yes.
Second Career, okay, which was specifically designed to help people who've lost jobs, maybe their second or even third generation in the mill, find something new. Is that working?
Well, let me help your memory. Originally it wasn't. So originally Second Career was designed for people in mid-career stream to retrain to take on another job. Fortunately, the program was in place and repurposed because it happened right before. I had the pleasure of becoming Principal Secretary in June of 2008, and the economy promptly decided to provide me with new opportunities to develop new policy in around November. Second Career was one of those programs that then was repurposed to help assist in that type of program. When I left government almost 3 years ago, I would say the success rate was fairly high, akin to that which you'd see in a normal graduation rate coming out of universities and colleges. So people attaching to the labor force in the career for which they were retraining coming out of Second Career. My recollection is in and around the 80% mark about who was coming through that program. I'm not sure what the most recent numbers would be on that program and whether there's a need to up that program even further. And whether it's fit for purpose now for this type of program, I would say probably not, because these are pretty unique circumstances, particularly for, as you were saying, people at the age of 52, 53, 54, what are their career, what's their career arc, how much longer are they looking to work, and in what industry are they looking to work?
Stan, as we heard from the mayor, people love their town. They don't want to leave. Even if there might be jobs in Saskatchewan, Alberta, or Newfoundland and Labrador, they don't want to leave. What advice do you give to people who find themselves loving where they live so much, but unable to get work where they live and love so much?
Well, there's the old saying, you can take the boy out of the north, but you can't take the north out of the boy. And I understand why people are so committed to their towns. The underlying resources up there are still there. You've got wood fiber. So the questions are, does that, the wood allocation given to that company, is that being given back to the government or to the Ministry of Natural Resources? And I hope it is. So then, cannot the government start developing policies or having a working group to start investigating value-added wood production and seeing what we can do to bring the IKEAs of the world and saying, look, we can guarantee you this wood fiber, it's in a community that's very loyal. We do have some infrastructure here. Perhaps that might meet your needs. Maybe you can reconfigure the mill if the company is prepared to sell it, or else the access of very rich Northern Ontario wood fiber to produce something else that's needed in the world markets for value-added wood production.
Madge, help us understand though, I mean, a lot of these towns in Northern Ontario literally only exist because 100 years ago, a big company decided to come and set up a mill, paper products company, whatever, and now that that company is gone, how do we make sure the town doesn't go as well?
That's certainly a concern, and one that's familiar to a lot of the smaller towns, and something that they're probably still struggling in reinventing themselves in many ways. And so initially, I think the towns, certainly the ones that I've experienced, you had to go back and focus on the constituents, the people themselves, ensuring that the adjustment services were there to assist them in the transition, and then just remind them and provide a more solid community environment. So more communication with them, dealing with them more on one-on-one, just to bring that foundation back, because you often feel that you've lost, someone's pulled the rug out from underneath your feet. So what are some of the things that you can do that do not cost a great deal of money, since again, you're struggling with the loss of your taxation revenue as well. So there's certainly a ripple effect in the revenue streams of everyone, individually and corporately.
Jameson, I guess we need to figure out though, on balance, when the big industry shuts down, is the town dead? Or do they get a second act in life?
Well, yeah, I would call it Plan B, right? So what I would say, increasingly what we're seeing in current times is, especially in some of the more urban centers, there are a lot of cities experiencing a second life. I think one of the challenges is it's captured in that Globe and Mail editorial. The jobs that come back, are they the same type of jobs? Are they the same paying jobs with benefits and whatnot?
Well, they're not.
They're not. I mean, although I think Stan's advice is wise. And what other industries can you try to pull in? So there's an immediate reaction. Then there's also, I think, a second aspect that government needs to think about more and more, and so do communities. Worry about the 52-year-old, but also worry about the 12-year-old in Iroquois Falls. And I think sometimes we focus way too much on the immediate urgent and forget the important. So for sure, try to think of other companies and what you can do to replace those jobs immediately. Are there other industries beyond forestry that might want to co-locate there? But I'd also say, as you were saying before, in economic theory, it would be, what was your competitive advantage 100 years ago? And your competitive advantage 100 years ago was proximity to an incredible resource that then also built up an incredible skill base. If that competitive advantage no longer exists, it's time to think about what's your next competitive advantage. And I would say the young people in Iroquois Falls are just as talented, just as intelligent as anyone else in Ontario, so start to invest in their education as well. And I think infrastructure also has to be something that government is a great investment for government rather than an immediate influx of dollars.
And infrastructure can mean today broadband, doesn't mean roads and bridges.
I mean, we were discussing off air before we came here. The immediate response during the last recession was shovel-ready projects, right? I would have said, let's focus a lot more on those things that are going to move the economy in the long term, and let's hope that in the next two budgets we see from both the provincial government and the federal government that's where they focus. In the north, that could mean anything from roads, broadband, access to potable water. There's lots of opportunities for them up there that can create the environment that an IKEA of the world will say, wow, there's some talented young people there with some valuable infrastructure. That's why I'm going to stay, rather than there's great wood, because clearly that's no longer necessarily your competitive advantage in that community.
They say, Stan, that the North exports two things, right? Products and people. The young people don't stay. This is all part of that cycle, I guess, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's still enormous opportunity. Even last night, you were talking about Fort Francis, and there's a new gold mine opening up fairly close to the community. I mean, mining is cyclical. We're going through a down cycle right now, but the trend is up. I think we have to still remember the world is in a commodity super cycle. China is industrializing, India will be industrializing and urbanizing. So there's enormous mineral potential throughout all of Northern Ontario. So right now we have a bit of an upheaval with the new Mining Act regulation. We have a lot of uncertainty, and that's government driven. Minister Gravel is doing a renewal, another look at the mineral strategy.
This is the Northern Development and Mines Minister.
Yes, and the reason why we're taking another look at the mineral development strategy is the new Mining Act regulation has so messed things up that you're basically seeing a standstill to mining development.
Well, we should not leave the impression that this is a phenomenon that only happens in small places in Northern Ontario, because it's not the case. And here's I guess exhibit number 2, if Iroquois Falls is exhibit number 1. A year ago on this program, we were talking about the fact that in southwestern Ontario, Leamington, you got it, Jameson, there was a plant that for a very long time canned tomatoes, and then Heinz shut down. Let's roll a clip on that, please, if we could. Go ahead. If you can't grow tomatoes because there's no market for your tomatoes, what's the next logical thing you could convert to without going massively into debt to buy new equipment, plants, and so on?
So the least cost and least risk option would be to go into the grains and oilseeds, or it would be in Ontario it's corn and soybeans, because there's an international market for that. And there's also, the growing conditions and the soil quality is made for that in southern Ontario. But it's not, it doesn't salvage the equipment that they have invested in. So the tomato equipment can basically only be used for tomatoes.
Andreas, a food economist at the University of Guelph. Okay, they actually figured out how to repurpose that plant down in southwestern Ontario, and not all the jobs were lost. It didn't shut down. They got a second life. Can the mill at Iroquois Falls, do you think, Stan, have a second life?
Perhaps, depending on the context of global demand for other value-added wood products. We need to. Some of this is marketing. Some of this is really understanding the value-added wood production cycle globally, the IKEAs of the world. And you can't. You've got the fiber. You've got an educated workforce. You've got the infrastructure. It's on a road. So why not take a look at other options? Going up the value chain with specialty papers, perhaps doing cabinets for IKEA or other manufacturers. You don't want to. You at least want to give a good crack at trying to find an alternative to use the mill and to use the valuable wood fiber, because you already have all that wonderful infrastructure that's there.
Madge, a lot was made of the fact that it was 3 days before Christmas that Resolute announced its decision to close this thing down. The mayor told us he'd only been sworn into office 3 days earlier. In your view, what do companies who want to shut down their plants for economic reasons or whatever, what obligations, what responsibilities do they have to the town, to the people whose decisions are being affected by all of this?
That's an excellent question, and I'm not sure of what the legal responsibilities are of the company. Certainly, when you're in that community and you're an employee of that company, you hope they're going to be a good corporate citizen and give you notice and fair consideration when they're planning or getting ready to shut down or downsize. You hope that they're going to look at you as a person and not just the bottom line. Financially. And I think a lot of the community, a lot of the businesses, and especially the mining company, I have to say, because their operations are finite and they know exactly how long they're going to be, for the most part, they have always been fairly proactive with adjustment services and programs, being there and ready for their employees when they're starting to downsize and getting ready for a closure. But other companies are doing that as well. And certainly you hope that if nothing else, they will provide information on those services and programs. They may not fund them to ensure that they're there in the community and in a timely fashion, but you hope that the information is certainly communicated to the employees so they're not just left stranded. So they do know there's somewhere to go for information and assistance.
Jameson, you work at the Martin Prosperity Institute. Roger Martin's a guy who spent a lot of his life trying to convince business that they have a moral, not just a fiduciary responsibility to make money for their shareholders. So in a situation like this, mill closes, town devastated, what moral responsibility do you think corporations have in those circumstances?
Well, let's start with the legal, because I'm a recovering lawyer. There's going to be a notice period under any contract that they have with their employees, and also from a fiscal year-end responsibility. I'm sure that the company felt that they lived up to those. I wouldn't even go to moral quite yet. I'd go to brand. When this is something that's now a news story, that we are consumers of these products, and if there's one thing I know about the North, I might challenge you a little bit on the exporting of people. That's definitely a fact, but we always lament in Ontario politics that Ontario doesn't have the same sense of provincial pride that you see in other provinces. That's not true of Northern Ontario. My sense is if young people could stay in Northern Ontario, they would stay in Northern Ontario, and that's actually perhaps a competitive advantage that they need to tap into. But maybe more on that in the solutions portion. I think there is a moral obligation. I think when you've lived in a community for 102 years, at some point the community and the company become one, and to make that type of decision is to have an unnatural bifurcation between those two. So I think perhaps in this circumstance there should have been a more humane way to communicate that, especially if they saw it coming from a global economic force perspective, rather than it shouldn't have felt like a thunderbolt, one would argue, based on what you see coming down the pipe.
And I guess, Stan, part of you talk about a brand issue, Jameson. The reality is we don't really go to a store and see the name Resolute on a product, right? They make stuff for other companies and we see their brand name. So the brand punishment is kind of hard to do in this case, is it not?
Absolutely. You really, they're sort of behind the scenes corporation and their products are everywhere. And but you can make people aware of that, and there is sort of between the digital communications that we have in this day and age, it's pretty easy to distribute information all over the place in the sense of basically branding a corporation is not socially responsible.
So let's get a little proactive here. The world we understand in the province of Ontario that stuff is happening around the world that has an impact on us here. Price of commodities, timber doing what it's doing, oil doing what it's doing, mining doing what it's doing, etc. Jameson, start us off. How can little towns, maybe one industry towns, act more proactively so that they can be prepared for this day if and when it ever happens?
So I would say at least in two ways. First of all, since we're transitioning to the positive, the nice thing is the same paper that you quoted, Globe and Mail, had a headline saying Ontario is going to lead the Canadian economy in the next year. So where is that growth going to?
Interview on that still to come on this program.
Where is that growth going to come from? And how can we make sure that some of it at least accrues to these smaller communities, and particularly in the north? Number one, the problems that are faced by these communities are not dissimilar to that are faced across the province. How do we make sure that our small businesses become medium and our medium become large? Number one. And number two of that is how do we make sure they become more innovative? These are two problems that Roger has talked about for 13 years in his reports. To some measures of success, we continue to incentivize and mythologize the small business economy that is in Ontario and the resource-based economy that is particularly in Northern Ontario. We need to try to help those people transition to make sure that they are moving towards more innovative products. I then move to what I was saying before about focusing on that 12-year-old and raising all the boats, and particularly the education levels, not only of the Aboriginal communities in those areas, but of the general population as well. I would say we're only 13.5 million people, and that's a problem from a retail sector perspective. If we only sell to ourselves, we aren't going to grow at 2.5%, 3%, which is required to fund all the good public goods that people require. We need to sell to the world. So what are we going to sell to the world? I think in these communities, trying to sell those more innovative products, higher end, higher value, maybe not the same number of jobs. I would really encourage all of us to stop focusing on job numbers, start focusing on wage numbers, start focusing on what we're actually producing to the world.
Madge, how about you? You're in Thunder Bay. This, no doubt, is an issue that comes up frequently in your line of work. What can people do to be proactive so that if and when that day comes, they're ready?
Well, I think certainly this is Research and Innovation Week, so it's a good topic to be discussing today. But certainly I think when you're looking at the district of Thunder Bay, we are looking at how can we sustain those small and medium-sized enterprises, and looking at and a lot of the support for the innovation and the centers that support young entrepreneurs, that type of thing. That's growing, and they're becoming stronger, and certainly so there's a focus on that. But it is paying a lot of attention to diversifying its economy and not being so dependent on one or two larger employers. So there are a number of initiatives. Certainly they did the mining readiness strategy, and that is not just for the Thunder Bay district, but really can be used as a template for any communities along, within this area that are there near the resources that are going to be taken out of the ground, and also some of the supplies and services that could be provided to that resource-based industry. So there is work, and I think that's something that you can't ever lose sight of. There are small, medium enterprises, and how do you sustain them? How do you keep them there and help them grow so they're not disappearing? And also then the educational. Exactly what one of the gentlemen said, you can't lose sight of the people that are coming up through the school system at the present time. What is the supply of labor going to look like? And you have to ensure that they have that basic education and skill sets that are going to be needed by employers in the future. So you have to, it's very complex, so you have to have a number of balls in the air at all times.
Okay, these are good ideas and good lists, but Stan, let me put a different example to you. Kitchener-Waterloo. Very difficult going through the recession, lost a lot of manufacturing jobs. The city basically decided to kind of recreate itself as a high-tech innovation hub, and now it's one of the best anywhere in North America. Does the North have to do that?
Absolutely. And my hometown of Sudbury is a terrific example. You've got 130 years of mining activity in what is one of the richest mining districts in North America. You have clusters of expertise in the actual mines. You have clusters of expertise in the supply and service center. And you have also mining educational expertise and research expertise. And I wrote a recent column basically saying, listen, the provincial government policy with education is basically differentiation and specialization. So in other words, all universities can't be all things to all people. So I had said basically, well, let's take the mining programs, mining engineering and mining geology programs from the southern universities, merge them with Laurentian, and expand them and create a Harvard of hard rock mining. That way you've got all of the education concentrated in one place, a world-class facility that you will able to basically enhance its reputation around the world, and you're getting students coming in from all around the world to get a first-class mining education in one of the primary mining areas of North America.
So that's happened.
Well, no.
Or it's happening?
No. It was just what you're having is it was just a proposal. Nothing's happening at it. It's because you've got university presidents here in Southern Ontario that are probably a little bit resistant to letting mining programs go because there's a potential of multi-million-dollar donations from the mining millionaires. So why would U of T allow their mining engineering facility to be relocated to Sudbury and lose a potential $10 million donation from Pierre Lassonde or Seymour Sulich or something to that effect? So this is something that really needs to be driven from the top down, because who is going to voluntarily give up potentially lucrative faculties?
Well, here's where I get Jameson to come in and put his former political hat on and say...
Well, can I challenge that just for one second?
Sure,
So
go ahead.
using the Kitchener-Waterloo example, so in my past life in politics, there were often communities would come forward and say, well, we want to be the next Kitchener-Waterloo. You know, my hometown of St. Catharines, very similar. I don't disagree with a top-down approach that government needs to play a role in building a strong foundation for some of that economic growth to happen. But Kitchener-Waterloo also had a pretty remarkable history and some pretty remarkable leadership. They had a university with an incredibly strong backbone on math, sciences, and computer sciences. They had a really strong, almost 100-year history around co-op because of actuarial programs coming out of Kitchener-Waterloo. And then leadership. The Governor General was the president of the university. So
and two guys named Balsillie and Lazaridis didn't hurt either.
Not at all. So yes, there needs to be government response and government leadership, but the community has to step up as well. And that's not to put pressure, because I think that's there in these communities. Just let's not forget that a lot of these things come from the grassroots. Sometimes success doesn't want government to find it so it can continue.
We've got a few minutes left here, and I want to ask a very difficult question, but let's do it anyway. Madge, you know, in Australia, the government there said to a lot of one industry towns that were kind of not on the coast, but in the interior of the country, we just can't afford to keep you alive anymore, and if the mill goes and you go under, that's life. Is that a message that can be delivered in the province of Ontario? Does it need to be delivered to some people in the province of Ontario?
Wow. I would hope not. But then again, that's a very difficult question, and I'm so glad you started with me on this one. But certainly, I suppose it could happen. I would like to think it wouldn't. Again, because all of those small communities mean so much to the people that are there, and also overall to the economy. And it really takes all of these communities to make this region, and they depend upon each other. So,
well,
so
hold that thought, because I want to come to. I appreciate being in Northern Ontario. You don't like the idea of just allowing a town to go under, but Stan, what about it? There are going to be more people in Southern Ontario who are saying, I don't want my taxes going to subsidize increasingly obsolete places.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, it may not be true, but I'm telling you that thought's out there.
Absolutely.
What should the response be?
Well, first of all, if you're going to just pull the plug on a community, you better be prepared to do some kind of compensation to buy out houses that are going to crash and be worth nothing. Also help with moving costs. That's the first thing that comes to mind if you're going to willy-nilly just say, poof, I don't want you in existence anymore. Number two, a lot of these small communities in Northern Ontario are in very geologically rich areas. When you take a look at the Hemlo discovery back in the late 80s, literally the last time I drove on that highway about a decade and a half, it was within 100 feet of the highway. And we've been tromping around there, poking drills in the ground for so long, and all of a sudden, we discover the fourth richest gold mining district in Northern Ontario. So, you know, to pull the plug on a community when you haven't really done a really good assessment on the resources in the ground is a bit jumping the gun. Let's really do an analysis of what's in the geology, what is the potential for forestry if that's part of the economic background before we start leveling the axe and chopping communities down.
Jameson, I'll give you the last word on this. Can governments in this day and age say, if there's no economic rationale for your town to continue to exist, I'm sorry, we're going to let you go?
No. I mean, there's a time to be an economist, and there's a time to be human. And they
are not the same thing, right?
Often. With all due respect to the economics department at the University of Toronto, no. I mean, I think there was, in my time in politics, the politicians that I saw, particularly from the North, were fierce in their defense of their communities. And I don't think they would have that ability. Now, saying goodbye to an industry is different than saying goodbye to a town. And I think there's still so many opportunities in the North. The Ring of Fire remains one that I know is a source of both great optimism and hope and frustration and anger up north. But until you get that one right, I wouldn't shut any town down.
Gotcha. Madge Richardson, awfully good of you to join us via Skype from Thunder Bay, Ontario. We had such a great time this past weekend in your community. I hope we'll be back soon. Stan Sudol from the republicofmining.com and Jameson Stevie from the Martin Prosperity Institute and the Institute for Competitiveness and Prosperity. Many thanks.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.